In the 1400s, stepping into a classroom could feel more like walking into a prison than a place to learn. What teachers did back then wouldn't just get them fired today, it might get them arrested, but the real question is, how was any of this ever considered normal? Let's start with what they held in their hands. Teachers in the 1400s carried birch rods as their primary teaching tool. These weren't gentle taps on the wrist. We're talking about full-scale beatings that would shock modern prison guards. The birch rod was crafted from flexible branches that delivered maximum pain. It was basically nature's way of making sure students remembered their multiplication tables forever. Some teachers soaked these rods in salt water overnight to amplify the agony. The salt would burn any cuts, turning simple punishment into torture. German schools took things further with spike paddles. Actual metal spikes protruded from wooden surfaces. These teaching tools came with more sharp edges than a medieval kitchen. Students earned beatings for wrong answers, tardiness, or speaking without permission. The beatings happened in front of entire classes. Every strike echoed through stone halls while terrified children watched. Educational demonstrations where the subject was pain and the textbook was your back. Teachers used public violence to control behavior through intimidation. Church records document severe injuries from these sessions. Broken bones, permanent scars, and worse-filled medieval medical reports. Children as young as 5 received these beatings. Today's kindergartners cry over broken crayons, but medieval 5-year-olds were getting broken bones as part of their curriculum. The system operated on religious principles. Teachers believed they were beating evil out of children. Pain was considered a pathway to godliness. There were no age limits, no safety rules, no oversight whatsoever. The community viewed these brutal methods as completely normal. Parents often thanked teachers for these brutal sessions. They saw violence as proper discipline. Teachers faced zero consequences for injuries they caused. They could break bones, leave scars, or worse, without any accountability. Medieval parent-teacher conferences must have been interesting when discussing your child's progress in both reading and surviving. The entire educational system was built on systematic violence against children. But physical violence was just one weapon in the medieval teacher's arsenal. Wooden punishment boxes turned medieval classrooms into miniature prisons. These contraptions were designed to break spirits through isolation and physical discomfort. The boxes were deliberately undersized. Students couldn't stand straight or sit comfortably. Medieval teachers believed cramped spaces built character, like human-sized pickle jars for educational purposes. Children spent hours cramped in painful positions while lessons continued around them. Most cages lacked ventilation entirely. Students gasped for air in stifling darkness. Fresh air was apparently a privilege that had to be earned through perfect behavior. Winter made things worse when boxes were placed outside in courtyards, turning punishment into survival challenges. Italian schools built punishment cells under staircases and in basement corners. These educational storage units made modern closets look spacious. Students emerged pale, shivering, and often seriously ill from their confinement. Monastic records mention children developing respiratory problems from stale air. Others suffered muscle cramps and joint damage. Teachers used boxes for minor infractions. Speaking without permission meant immediate imprisonment. The wooden cages were like medieval detention, except detention came with bonus suffocation and possible hypothermia. The psychological damage often exceeded physical harm. Children learned to associate education with imprisonment. Parents accepted these methods as necessary discipline. Students lived in constant fear of being locked away for any small mistake or moment of curiosity about their lessons. But cramped wooden spaces weren't the only way teachers tortured young bodies. Catholic schools perfected knee torture using dried peas, coarse salt, and sharp stones scattered across classroom floors. This punishment method spread throughout Spain, France, and Austria. The setup was methodical and cruel. Teachers created precise patterns of sharp materials for maximum pain. Students knelt directly on these surfaces while their kneecaps ground against every edge. Medieval teachers turned prayer time into a contact sport between knees and kitchen supplies. Teachers added complexity by forcing students to hold heavy books during their ordeal. Arms stayed perfectly outstretched for hours. Combining weightlifting with knee destruction was apparently the medieval version of multitasking in education. The combination of arm fatigue and knee agony was designed to be unbearable. Sessions lasted 1 to 3 hours without breaks. Students couldn't shift positions or adjust their weight. Modern students complain about uncomfortable desk chairs, but medieval students got professionally designed knee-shredding experiences. Movement or complaints earned additional punishment time. Long-term effects were devastating. Many students developed permanent knee damage and infections. Open wounds became infected in an era without antibiotics or proper medical care. Some children walked with limps for the rest of their lives from the systematic torture method. Dried peas served double duty as both soup ingredients and instruments of educational torture. Complete silence was mandatory during these punishments. Students endured agony without making sounds. Teachers used grain torture for talking, incomplete homework, or fidgeting during lessons. The silence requirement added psychological pressure to the already unbearable physical pain students were experiencing. But physical agony was just preparation for the public shame that often followed. Medieval teachers weaponized shame through elaborate public humiliation rituals. These punishments extended far beyond classroom walls into entire communities. The dunce cap became the ultimate symbol of academic failure. Students wore tall pointed hats marked with Latin insults like asinus, meaning donkey, educational fashion statements that announced your intellectual struggles to everyone within eyesight. These caps were visible from across rooms, ensuring everyone knew exactly who had failed. Teachers forced students to parade through towns wearing shame signs announcing their academic failures. Medieval social media involved wearing your bad grades as actual clothing accessories. Some students wore bells that jingled with every step, marking them as intellectual outcasts. The fool stool served as classroom exile. Students sat facing away from lessons while wearing additional markers of shame. Timeout chairs with bonus public humiliation and academic exclusion. Teachers sometimes added neck signs listing specific failures for extra humiliation. Hair shaving created lasting physical reminders of academic failure. Teachers cut distinctive patterns into student hair. These markings took months to grow back, serving as long-term shame advertisements. The hair patterns were designed to be immediately recognizable as signs of educational failure throughout the community. Medieval hairstyles that said less about fashion and more about your mathematical incompetence. Town criers announced student failures in market squares during community gatherings. Parents often requested these public announcements, believing community shame motivated better behavior. The entire village participated in humiliating children who struggled with their academic work or made simple mistakes in class. But public shame was just the surface of deeper corruption in medieval education. Medieval teachers operated the original pay-to-play education system where academic success went to the highest bidder. Bribes flowed freely through school corridors like water through broken pipes. Parents arrived with baskets of bread, cheese, eggs, and gold coins. Teacher appreciation gifts that came with very specific academic expectations attached. Teachers openly accepted these offerings, understanding exactly what they purchased. Records from Florence and Venice show teachers receiving extra payments for preferential treatment. Rich kids got premium educational service, while poor kids got the basic learning package. These students received private tutoring, easier tests, and glowing recommendations regardless of ability. Poor students faced systematic academic discrimination. Teachers ignored their work, mocked their efforts, and refused to grade assignments. Your family's grocery budget determined your report card more than your actual intelligence. Some teachers literally turned away when poor students raised their hands. The bribery system controlled test results and class rankings completely. Academic achievement became a commodity bought and sold like any other market good. Wealthy families essentially purchased their children's educational success, while poor families watched their brilliant children fail systematically. Medieval schools where your test scores depended more on your father's cheese supply than your study habits. Churches issued warnings against favor buying in schools, but these warnings carried no enforcement power, so teachers continued accepting bribes without consequences. The corruption reinforced social inequality through education. This created a permanent class system based on wealth rather than ability or intelligence. But financial corruption was just one way teachers endangered their students. Medieval teachers transformed classrooms into death traps by bolting doors from the outside. Students became involuntary prisoners with no escape routes during emergencies. The locking mechanism was brutally simple. Teachers exited and slid heavy wooden bolts across doors. Educational facilities that doubled as temporary jails for anyone under the age of 16. Students heard bolts sliding into place, knowing they were completely trapped. Windows offered no salvation. They were built high with iron bars and no ventilation. School architecture designed by people who apparently thought fresh air was bad for learning. The few windows provided no airflow, turning classrooms into suffocating boxes during warm weather. Emergency situations became fatal. Students couldn't flee fires, escape illness, or get fresh air. Teachers created educational death traps with stone walls and wooden doors. The 1478 Bruges fire killed over 12 students locked inside during morning lessons. They died because safety mattered less than control. Lock sessions lasted from sunrise to sunset. Students spent entire days trapped in cramped, airless rooms. Medieval students couldn't even stretch without defying authority. Teachers believed physical confinement was necessary for proper mental discipline and character development in their young charges. Learning environments that made modern maximum security prisons look comfortable and well ventilated. Parents had no power to intervene once children were enrolled. Teachers held absolute authority over student freedom, and parents were expected to support these methods. The community viewed locked classrooms as normal educational practice that built discipline and prevented distractions from interfering with proper learning. But physical imprisonment was just one form of exploitation teachers practiced. Medieval teachers converted schools into personal labor camps where students provided unpaid services unrelated to education. This exploitation was systematic and widespread. Work assignments were extensive and exhausting. Students cleaned classrooms, ran teacher errands, and harvested school crops. Educational institutions that came with complementary janitorial and farming responsibilities. Rural schools demanded firewood gathering, animal milking, and livestock care. Some teachers crossed every boundary by making students clean chamber pots and stable animals as punishment. Wrong answers in arithmetic led directly to medieval bathroom maintenance duties. These tasks were assigned without parental consent or compensation. Eastern European schools required students to spend half their days laboring instead of learning. Tuition fees that bought you half education and half unpaid employment. Teachers claimed physical work built character while enjoying free labor. Girls faced additional exploitation through forced kitchen service at wealthy schools. These girls missed academic lessons while preparing meals for teachers and male students. The gender-based labor assignments reflected medieval beliefs about women's roles and limited their educational opportunities significantly compared to their male classmates. Medieval career counseling that steered girls toward cooking regardless of their actual interests or abilities. The work was dangerous and inappropriate for children. Students handled sharp tools, worked with unpredictable animals, and performed adult tasks. Teachers faced no oversight for exploiting student workers. The community viewed child labor as normal educational practice that prepared students for adult responsibilities. But forced labor wasn't the most extreme punishment teachers could impose. Medieval teachers possessed the terrifying power to send students to actual jail for classroom infractions. They partnered with church courts to criminalize normal childhood behavior. The collaboration between schools and legal systems was seamless. Teachers reported students for disobedience, bad language, or minor theft, and officials treated these as serious crimes. School disciplinary systems with direct hotlines to the local dungeon. Students faced real imprisonment for behaviors modern schools handle with parent conferences. Public stocks punished teenage boys who challenged authority. Classroom disruptions that earned you a starring role in the town square's punishment theater. The humiliation was designed to destroy spirits completely. Court records show students sentenced to hard labor for mocking instruction. Medieval zero-tolerance policies for anyone who dared to make jokes during lessons. These sentences lasted several days while other children continued their education normally. Escalation from classroom to courtroom happened frighteningly fast. Students might start with simple reprimands and end in chains. Teachers had unlimited authority to involve legal systems in educational disputes. The legal partnership gave teachers almost unlimited power over student lives and created fear throughout entire families. Educational institutions with their own express delivery service to the local jail. Parents paid fines for their children's release. This financial pressure encouraged support for harsh discipline, creating cycles of abuse that benefited corrupt officials. The threat of legal consequences made students terrified to express themselves or challenge any aspect of their education. But even imprisonment wasn't the harshest consequence teachers could deliver. Medieval teachers wielded permanent expulsion like a devastating weapon, destroying children's futures over infractions that wouldn't register as problems today. This nuclear option was used frequently and carelessly. The reasons for lifetime bans were absurdly trivial. Students faced permanent removal for speaking out of turn, failing to memorize prayers, or asking too many questions. Educational policies that treated curiosity as a capital offense. Teachers demanded absolute perfection at all times. Economic discrimination was shameless and systematic. Poor students were expelled for failing to provide candles or heating money during winter. School fees that included both tuition and heating bills, with expulsion as the penalty for late payment. These children lost their only chance at advancement due to family poverty. Girls faced automatic exclusion after puberty due to moral distractions. Medieval educational policies that treated teenage girls like walking academic emergencies. This policy eliminated educational opportunities for half the population based purely on biological development. Expulsion standards were impossibly strict. A single sneeze during religious services could trigger permanent removal. Teachers treated natural human behavior as criminal activity. The fear of permanent expulsion created an atmosphere of terror where students were afraid to breathe too loudly. Schools with stricter admission standards than modern exclusive clubs, except the membership was for 7-year-olds learning basic reading. Regional bans made expulsion devastatingly final. Expelled students couldn't attend other schools in the area. Children had no second chances and no alternative options. Entire families suffered social shame when children were permanently banned from educational institutions throughout their communities. But for students who managed to stay enrolled, teachers had one more punishment that left marks lasting far longer than shame. Medieval teachers had another horrifying punishment tool: burning students' hands with flames and hot metal. This wasn't accidental contact with candles during lessons, but deliberate torture designed to scar children permanently. Disobedient students had their hands forced near open flames or heated metal objects as standard punishment. Teachers who thought the best way to teach proper handwriting was to barbecue the fingers that held the pen. This method was used to burn away sin, according to medieval educational philosophy. Teachers sometimes forced students to place their fingers dangerously close to candle flames during oral recitations. Wrong answers meant moving closer to the fire. Pop quizzes where getting the answer wrong meant getting a side of hand roasting with your education. The psychological pressure of combining academic performance with potential burning created terror in classrooms. Severe cases involved pressing students with heated rods or fire pokers. These metal instruments were heated in classroom fires until they glowed red hot. Medieval schools that stocked torture devices alongside their educational supplies. Teachers applied these burning tools directly to student skin for major infractions. Medical care was rarely provided after these burning sessions. Burns often became severely infected in an era without proper antiseptics or treatment. Students were expected to continue their studies while nursing painful, festering wounds. Learning cursive writing while your fingers are covered in infected burn wounds was apparently considered character building. Church authorities recorded these punishments as spiritual cleansing rather than cruelty. They believed physical burning purified the soul and removed evil influences from disobedient children. The religious justification made parents support these brutal methods as necessary for their children's spiritual development. The burning punishments left permanent scars that marked students for life. These visible reminders served as warnings to other children about the consequences of disobedience. Many students probably spent their adult lives explaining their scarred hands to people who couldn't imagine such educational brutality. Teachers faced no consequences for permanently disfiguring students through burning. The community viewed hand burning as normal educational practice that built discipline and religious devotion. Parents often requested these punishments, believing physical scarring would prevent their children from future sins and academic failures. The systematic use of fire as an educational tool shaped medieval society's relationship with learning, creating generations who associated knowledge with physical pain and spiritual purification through deliberate bodily harm. These medieval teaching methods created a culture where education meant survival rather than growth, shaping entire generations who learned to fear knowledge instead of embracing it.